New players have been flooding into Magic with this new Final Fantasy set, but I think that all of the hype for the big characters have led to players to miss out on some of the great cards released within the set. While Cloud, Noctis, Lightning are all fantastic cards, the hype around them has led to new and even experienced players to overlook some key cards that you can find within the set. Today, I'm going to be running over some cards from Final Fantasy that really stood out to me and have even won me some games recently. Starting off with a good instant, Magic Damper is 1 blue to make target creature gain +1/+1 and hexproof, plus the bonus of getting to untap it. Starting off with the most generic things that you can do with this card, of course you can, whenever someone swings at you, choose to untap one of your creatures, giving it a small buff and have it be a blocker for you. On the other side of combat, you can, after declaring attackers, choose one of your creatures to get a buff and then untap it itself, not only giving it pseudo-vigilance, but also a small combat trick to get in 1 extra damage. And now, looking at some of the more interesting stuff that we can do besides combat with this spell. The spell is obviously a good protection spell, giving us hexproof for only 1 blue mana, but where I see the most value is with getting to untap a creature for 1 mana. Powerful commanders in blue like Stella Lee, Shorkai, and many others could really benefit off getting able to untap them, say on the person before yours end step. A Stella Lee player can now hold up counter magic, but if no one cast anything worth countering, can now still do their thing on someone else's turn, even if Stella Lee was tapped, getting to untap it and do all of your shenanigans during their end step. Magic Damper is an all-around great 1 mana instant that is a Swiss Army knife of value that I found myself throwing into a wide variety of my decks of recent. And now moving on to Lyse Hext, a 1 in Azorius for a 2/2 with prowess, and all of your non-creature spells cost 1 less to cast, plus the bonus ability of if you casted 2 or more spells that turn, she has double strike. Lyse Hext is a card that I find fitting into 2 very popular archetypes in Commander, being Artifacts and Spellslinger. Starting with Spellslinger, for only 3 mana, you get a cost reducer for your instants and sorceries, plus a good attacker with her having prowess and double strike whenever you start slinging multiple spells. And then its bottom ability comes in handy more than I think people give it credit for, with blocking. As if for say you casted a removal spell plus a preordain in your Spellslinger deck on someone else's turn before combat, she can get double strike on your opponent's turn too, making her an even more threatening blocker for your opponents to deal with. This card also seems to pair nicely with the flurry mechanic seen in Magic's last set, Tarkir Dragonstorm, caring a lot about casting 2 spells on your turn. So I would say any Shiko or Narset decks would really love this cost-reducing attacker. On the other end of the coin, Artifact decks and even Enchantress decks would also love Lysol in the 99. Esper Urza, Alalia, even Enchantress decks like Zur would love to see it. Once again, not only reducing the cost of our artifacts or enchantments, but also being a good attacker as well, since most Artifact and Enchantress decks will be casting 2 or more spells without even trying to. Lyse has found itself a really nice home in my Arna deck, reducing the casting cost of all my good enchantment auras and my equipments, and I'm sure that it'll find a good home in some of your decks too. Next on the list of cards to mention is Ride the Shoopuf, which is 1 and a green for a enchantment that has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and for 5 and 2 green, it can become a 7/7 beast creature itself. For starters, obviously landfall decks will love this card. Alboon getting another instance of its bottom effect, and Karametra getting to boost its creatures while just doing its thing ramping wise. +1/+1 counters decks would also really like this effect. Popular commanders like Skullbriar and Shylay and Halar would really love getting the 3 +1/+1 counters for just playing lands on their turn. Animar Soul of Elements would also love an extra +1/+1 counter every turn just to reduce the cost of its big creatures, so for landfall and +1/+1 counter focused decks, this seems like a slam dunk. And now while this card is less versatile than the previous 2 that I mentioned in this video, I think that the bottom ability is greatly overlooked by most players. For a lot of budget decks in the archetypes I mentioned, board wipes can be harder to recover from than more expensive and high power decks. But this bottom ability gives you a good foundation to fall back on even after having your creatures cleared. If the game is at its final stages where all or most players are low on life, you can get a 7/7 instantly after a creature board wipe that doesn't have summoning sickness if it was on your board before the board wipe happened. This means that you can swing in for a decisive blow on an opponent that is now open from the board wipe. So while it does get removed by cards like Austere Command and Farewell, this is a great budget option that I would really like to see added to +1/+1 counter decks and landfall themed decks. And now for this next card, it is undoubtedly one of the most niche in this video, but it has turned into one of my favorite budget cards from the set, being Garnet, Princess of Alexandria. For just Selesnya, you get a 2/2 with lifelink that whenever it swings, you can remove a counter from any number of sagas that you control, and then put that many +1/+1 counters onto it. Now, this Final Fantasy set has introduced summons as a new creature type that combines sagas and creatures roll into one. A lot of these cards have found new homes in Tom Bombadil, Sigrid, and a lot of saga decks, giving more of a board presence to the once sat back and go tall enchantment themed decks. Garnet fits in perfectly with these lists. Not only does she add to the new aggro theme that a lot of these decks are taking, but also lets you manipulate your sagas, keeping them around for longer. Let's say that you have the card Knights of the Round on the field, but don't quite have the board state yet to swing out with its bottom ability for the win. Now with Garnet, you can take off some lore counters every combat to keep making more and more Knight tokens, and this can be used for a lot of more powerful sagas that you would want to manipulate the effects of. And while it is one of the most niche cards that I did a deep dive on with this video, I really wanted to mention it just because of how popular summons have become from the set. People with saga decks have been very quick to add cards like Behemoth, Knights of the Round to their decks, but have overlooked Garnet. And it's just one of those cards that I see being a staple in saga decks in Selesnya colors, and I really think people are overlooking. And now for the next couple cards, they're kind of too niche to do a deep dive on for like various archetypes, but I did want to mention them just because of how fun they are from the set. Von Street Thief is 2 and a red for a 2/2 human scout, which basically gives a Ragavan type effect to your scouts, pirates, and or rogues whenever they deal combat damage, and whenever you cast a spell you don't own, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each scout, pirate, and rogue that you control. And now while really good in pirate decks, I want to go over some of the more niche commanders that this could go into. Looking at the creature types besides pirates, Outlaws of Thunder Junction as a set really loves this card. Vian Goldwalker and Laughing Jasper Flint that care about having outlaws really like this card since Outlaw's creature type includes pirates and rogues. So not only do people with these decks get a cheaper Ragavan style effect, it also adds to their game plan like Laughing Jasper Flint that cares about casting spells you don't own. Next is Exdeath Void Warlock. For 1 in Golgari, it's a 3/3, which whenever it enters you gain 3 life, and at the beginning of your end step, if there are 6 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, you get to transform it. Once transformed, it becomes a spirit avatar with trample, where its power is equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard with 3 toughness. And there's not really a whole lot to talk about Exdeath, as it's kind of just an all-around good Golgari card. Whenever it enters, gaining us 3 life is good for whenever we have Marin or something that's going to bring our creatures back from the graveyard, and caring about our graveyard and flipping over into a big beater with trample is also just great to have for a good Golgari budget deck. While not a super flashy effect, I think that it's just good to mention for anyone with a Golgari deck that this could also be just a good card to add for life gain and to flip into a beater for the end game. And that was my main issue when making this video. A lot of the cards from the set are very good for one specific archetype. Obviously, there's a lot of equipment and Voltron themed support, since creatures like Cloud and Noctis from their games love using equipments. The fun part for me, who's someone who isn't super in love with Final Fantasy because I haven't played the games, were finding these cards that fit into multiple archetypes and could do good. Seeing how Lyse can fit into Enchantress, Artifacts, and Spellslinger decks and actually be a good 3-drop for all of them was really fascinating, and I love putting that out there and sharing it with you guys.